I remember the exact moment the world tilted on its axis. It wasn't in the cold, sterile light of a clinic, but in the quiet of my own home, holding a piece of paper that felt heavier than any weight I had ever lifted. The words on it were a jumble of medical terminology, a foreign language I couldn't comprehend, but one term stood out, stark and terrifying: pancreatic cancer. In that instant, everything I thought I knew about my life, my future, my own body, was thrown into question. The floor seemed to fall away, and I was suspended in a state of pure, unadulterated fear. The statistics, the prognoses, the clinical data, they all began to swirl in my mind, threatening to drown me. But as a doctor, I've learned that behind every chart, every scan, every diagnosis, there is a person. And this is not a story about a patient file. It's the story of a person, a life that refused to be defined by a single, devastating word. It's a story about what happens after the initial shock, when the first instinct is to fight back. That initial period was a storm, a whirlwind of appointments, tests, and conversations that felt both urgent and utterly surreal. The first step was to silence the noise, the cacophony of fear and statistics that echoed in my head, and to focus on what I could control. It began with building a team, not just a group of doctors, but a fellowship of experts who saw me not just as a case to be managed, but as a human being to be cared for. I sought second opinions, not out of distrust, but out of a deep-seated need for certainty, for a comprehensive understanding of the battlefield I was about to enter. Each consultation was a piece of a larger puzzle, helping me to map out the terrain of my own treatment. This process was empowering. It was the crucial pivot from being a passive recipient of a diagnosis to becoming an active, informed participant in my own survival. Alongside my medical team, another one was forming, quieter but just as vital. My support system, my family, my closest friends, they became my anchors in the turbulent sea of uncertainty. They were the ones who sat with me in waiting rooms, who listened to my fears without judgment, and who reminded me of the person I was before the diagnosis. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to reclaim a sense of agency, moving from a place of powerlessness to one of purpose. Before the diagnosis, my life was measured in achievements, deadlines, and a relentless forward momentum. My priorities were a carefully constructed tower of professional goals and future plans. But the illness, in its brutal honesty, dismantled that tower piece by piece. In its place, something new and far more profound began to grow. Living was no longer about the grand, sweeping gestures of a 5-year plan. It was about the small, exquisite moments that I had previously rushed past. The warmth of the morning sun on my face, the taste of a perfectly brewed cup of coffee, the shared laughter with a loved one over a simple meal. These became the cornerstones of my new reality. My strength was no longer defined by my capacity to endure a long workday, but by my ability to find joy in a day free from pain, or to take a short walk in the park. My purpose shifted from building a legacy to simply being present. This revaluation was not a conscious choice at first, but a gradual, organic transformation. The things that once seemed so important faded into the background, and what emerged was a crystal clear understanding of what truly gives life meaning: connection, gratitude, and the quiet, persistent beauty of an ordinary day. Treatment was grueling, but within that struggle, I discovered a depth of appreciation I never knew I was capable of. Of course, this journey was not a simple, linear path toward enlightenment. It was fraught with challenges and setbacks that tested the very limits of my resilience. The physical toll of chemotherapy was immense: the nausea, the fatigue that seeped into my bones, the metallic taste that lingered for days. Each treatment cycle was a mountain to be climbed, and some days I felt I lacked the strength for even the first step. But the emotional challenges were, in many ways, even more formidable. I came to know a specific kind of dread, a feeling I now call scanxiety. The days leading up to a CT scan were a special kind of hell, a period of suspended animation where every twinge, every ache, was a potential sign of the worst. The waiting for results was a slow-motion agony, a tightrope walk between hope and despair. There were lows, deep and dark, where the fear was so overwhelming that it felt like a physical presence in the room. In those moments, I had to learn to be kind to myself, to allow myself to feel the fear without letting it consume me. I developed coping mechanisms, small rituals of self-preservation. I practiced mindfulness, focusing on my breath to ground myself in the present moment. I wrote in a journal, pouring out the anxieties I couldn't always articulate. I learned that resilience isn't about being unbreakable. It's about the courage to put yourself back together, piece by piece, after you've been shattered. In the isolation of illness, it's easy to feel like you are the only one. The world outside continues its relentless pace, and you can feel left behind, an island of suffering. One of the most critical turning points in my journey was discovering that I was not alone. I found the Pancreatic Cancer Warriors community, an online group of individuals who understood, in a way no one else could, exactly what I was going through. In this shared space, there was no need for explanation or pretense. We could speak of our fears, our side effects, our small victories, and be met with a chorus of "Me too." This connection was a lifeline. It was a source of practical advice, emotional support, and, most importantly, a profound sense of belonging. Sharing my story, and hearing the stories of others, helped me to see my experience not as a mark of shame, but as a badge of honor. It was through this community that I began to consciously wrestle with my identity. For a long time, cancer patient felt like a label branded onto my soul, eclipsing everything else I was. But I realized that I had a choice. I could let this diagnosis become my entire story, or I could integrate it into the larger, more complex narrative of my life. I am a father, a husband, a friend, a lover of music, a terrible but enthusiastic gardener. And yes, I am also a person who has faced pancreatic cancer. It is not my sole identity, but it is an undeniable part of who I have become, stronger, more empathetic, and more fiercely alive. Today, my journey continues. The story doesn't end with the final round of chemotherapy or a no evidence of disease scan. It is an ongoing process of monitoring, of awareness, of living with a new kind of vigilance. The fear never vanishes completely, but it no longer holds the same power. It has become a quiet companion, a reminder to cherish the life I have fought so hard to keep. This experience has reshaped my perspective in ways I could never have imagined. It has ignited within me a passion for advocacy, a drive to raise awareness and to fight for better treatments and more support for those who will walk this path after me. My story is one of many, a single thread in a vast and complex tapestry of survival and loss. But it is my story to tell, and my message is one of hope, but not a naive hope for a world without struggle. It is a rugged, resilient hope, forged in the crucible of adversity. It's the hope that comes from knowing that even after the most devastating diagnosis, life can continue. It can be rich, it can be meaningful, and it can be beautiful. It's about more than just surviving. It's about the profound, enduring, and defiant act of living with and beyond the disease.